It's a great question about like what the Jags are going to do. Like that continues to be a thing around here. What will the Jags do with that 17th pick? And I've got this art. I don't really think it's a great bit, but it's worth 2 minutes.
Okay. Is this Mike Tannenbaum related?
No, it's
okay,
not.
We're good then.
It is not. It's so ESPN did today. They did something like the draft needs, and I was interested to see what they think the draft needs are. Now,
Jaguars,
usually this stuff comes from the guy covering the team around here, which would be Mike DeRocco with ESPN. So I figured it would be kind of what we thought. And if I just looked at the AFC South, I mean, you can go through every team, but the AFC South is a little fascinating because the Texans say they need defensive tackle.
Okay.
All right. So that makes sense.
But they've also kind of addressed it a little bit, I feel like.
They did. They got the Nico Autry.
Yep.
But they did lose Sheldon Rankins and Malik Collins, and they wanted Eric Armstead.
Yes.
Keep in mind. So the Indianapolis Colts, they look at receiver. They need a young game breaker to go along with Pittman and Downs and Pierce. An okay collection of receivers, headlined by Pittman, but they think they can get even
Pascal's still young, but I get that. Okay, fair.
And then I'll just go to Tennessee real quick. Need help in the trenches on defense after losing to Nico Autry. Obviously, they still have Jeffrey Simmons. So defensive tackle comes into play, or defensive end. The Jaguars, it says, adding Gabe Davis somewhat helps offset the loss of Calvin Ridley at receiver, but there isn't a young receiver on the roster who can grow with Trevor Lawrence and become a number one. Signing Eric Armstead was a big boost to the interior of the line. Jaguars need another tackle and edge rusher to play behind Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker. So they list the three needs with corner, wide receiver, defensive line, which I think everybody agrees with.
Yeah.
I think that the only I would say the only maybe debatable thing is when you say defensive line, do you mean interior or pass rush? I think you could still make the claim pass rush right now is more important. The Jags actually do have depth on the defensive line, on the interior.
Agreed.
Once they signed Armstead, they've got millions and millions of dollars tied up on the defensive line.
Great, yeah.
So not to say you couldn't go get a young player that's cheaper and add to the mix, but I believe pass rusher right now behind Trayvon and Josh is a little bit more paramount because it looks like they just got Gibson, who they picked up late in free agency, and that's really about it.
Yeah, see, to me, it's like when they brought in Darby and then they brought in Savage, like that led to me like, hey, you know what? Corner might not be on the table then.
Yeah, I agree with that.
When they brought in Eric Armstead, that told me, hey, you know what? First round, interior defensive line, probably not going to be on the table. So, like, to me, they've actually canceled some things out. So, once again, how I feel about it, and I think, corner could be a possibility, but it screams wide receiver to me, Brent.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I like that you just said it the way you said it, because sometimes we have to go back and just look at these things in a simple way.
Correct.
Right?
I'm a simple man, Brent.
Yeah, and you just kind of did it. But I think a lot of people will... We got in the chat brought up offensive line today. Okay. People love that because there are just some people that want offensive line. Get me the best offensive line. And I get it. I mean, Jim Harbaugh's comments recently at the owners' meetings really provoke a lot of thought and also a lot of logic, I think. But what you just said about corner, and we had a long discussion about this a couple weeks ago, where are you playing them? Like, who are you booting out of there? Without moving a player right now on this roster, what are you doing? Right? Like, where are you playing that guy?
Yeah.
Are you going to sit Tyson Campbell? Or are you going to sit Darby, who you just paid $5 million to?
Yeah. For some depth?
I don't know. I don't think so. So I think you simply say, wait a minute. They wanted to bring back Calvin Ridley with Gabe Davis, with, at least for the time being, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram as a pass catcher. They didn't.
Correct.
Isn't this quite simple? The Jags' biggest need on their board, not saying best player available, biggest need, at least in the way they want to build this thing, from 3 weeks ago to right now, is wide receiver.
Correct. Yeah, because here's the thing, Brent. Like, we'll see the whole plan with Savage, right? Like, we think Savage is going to kind of be like the utility player, like, kind of all over the place. Ronald Darby is a corner, okay? Like, he's going to play cornerback, and he played cornerback on a team in Baltimore. Like, guess what? Was a pretty good defense. So if he can hold a starting spot in Baltimore and contribute and help that team, I think he's kind of slated to start here in Jacksonville, regardless if he got in the first round or not. So, yeah, we're on the same page here where people do say corner still. If the corner falls to you, do you take him best player available? Well, no, you don't, because you're not going to draft a first-round guy and be like, all right, well, I guess you might be able to start, but Ronald Darby's pretty good, so let's have a training camp battle. Like, I don't need a training camp battle with my first-round pick, Brent. I need a first-round pick that can come in and be like, hey, I'm the guy. Let's go.
Yeah. Listen, all upgrades are always a thing. I get it, but you're right. This could be bad business. You probably promised Darby or these guys, like, hey, here's our plan with you, right? Mm-hmm. And you can't go 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, 6 weeks later and say, well, actually, we changed our mind. I mean, you can. That's the business. Yeah. I get it. But it's also maybe a little bit of bad business to do it that way. So I would agree with you, man. I think this makes a lot of sense for the Jaguars to go wide receiver. I think the logic tells us that just the Ridley stuff. If you were willing to pay Ridley $16, $17, $18, $19 million, not 23, and we fully get it, then doesn't that scream that they were looking for somebody on the outside? And that's why I think you'll see a lot of moving and shaking and people linking receiver to the Jags, from Brian Thomas to, I saw something recently, trading up to number 8 to go get Neighbors. And I was like, okay, let's do it, right? I think that's why you're going to see an aggressive Jaguars team.
We played this game before, though. We didn't expect Tyson Campbell. When the odds came out that draft day, it was like, well, they're taking Tyson Campbell?
Yes,
what?
yes.
We didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
I didn't see Anton Harrison coming. I don't think you saw Anton Harrison coming either.
I didn't.
So there's always a what if.
Mystery, yeah.
So then let me ask you this. If it's not wide receiver, Brent, and you're going to go to Vegas, go to one of the casinos, put the mortgage down, if you will. What position are you going with then?
I think the one that people aren't talking about enough, and I think we were talking about this weeks and weeks ago, is pass rusher.
Man, I hate agreeing with you all the time.
I think that's the one that people are not talking about enough. You're on the field a bunch. You're on the field more than you can get 4 corners on a field. You can definitely get 3 pass rushers on. Again, I'll use Jared Verse as an example because we know his name. If that guy slips down there, I think you can make the case that that's a very valuable pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Mm-hmm. It does not matter that you have 2 young guys under contract for a long time. You need more than 2 of those. You need more than 2 for depth. You ask the question right now, if Josh Allen goes down for 3 weeks, who the hell else is playing over there? You need to answer that question. You also have lightning packages that you can get all 3 on the field at the same time. You can get really creative if you want and get them on even more than maybe the basic defense would say. I think there's a lot of value in pass rusher. I think people are talking about that the least amount over this whole draft cycle for the Jaguars since the season ended. I think we've been talking about it quite a bit, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're right if they can't get the receiver that they want. I do think receiver has always been top of our list, and I think pass rusher to me is second on the list. I told you this coming out of the combine before they even hit free agency. I did not see this screaming cornerback the way everybody else did.
Yeah.
But everybody seemed like it screamed cornerback, and I just don't necessarily agree.